When pollution crosses borders, so does risk. Air pollution does not stop at national boundaries. New international research underscores how consequential that reality has become for public health, economic stability, and climate strategy. An analysis spanning 168 countries concludes that coordinated climate action could prevent up to 1.32 million premature deaths annually by 2040. Without alignment, however, cleaner air gains may be unevenly distributed, leaving many developing economies exposed to pollution generated elsewhere. For executives, policymakers, and investors, the findings reinforce a practical truth. Energy systems, industrial production, and supply chains are globally integrated, and so are their environmental impacts. Climate strategy is no longer a domestic cost-benefit exercise. It is a cross-border risk management issue with measurable human and financial consequences. At the center of the study is PM 2.5, fine particulate matter, and the leading environmental risk factor for premature mortality worldwide. Using atmospheric modeling and NASA satellite data, researchers mapped how pollution flows between countries under different 2040 emissions scenarios. Even where global emissions decline overall, the direction and balance of pollution exchange can shift, creating new exposure patterns across regions. The changing geography of pollution risk. One of the report's clearest messages is that national air quality outcomes are often shaped by foreign emissions. In parts of Africa and Asia, a substantial share of harmful particulate matter originates outside domestic borders. This dynamic introduces structural equity concerns. While wealthier economies typically have greater capacity to decarbonize and enforce environmental standards, developing countries may depend heavily on parallel action elsewhere to realize meaningful health improvements. Domestic regulation alone may not be enough. The implications extend beyond environmental policy. Workforce health and productivity can be affected by pollution generated abroad. Supply chain resilience may hinge on air quality trends outside a company's direct control. Regulatory exposure increasingly reflects international policy coordination, not just local compliance. For multinationals operating in emerging markets, cross-border emissions are not an abstract concept. They influence healthcare costs, labor availability, and political stability, factors that directly affect long-term returns. The study also highlights how mitigation pathways can redistribute benefits. Along the U.S.-Mexico border, for example, a sustainable development trajectory would significantly reduce cross-border pollution flows, with Mexico realizing a larger share of the resulting health gains. Such asymmetries reflect atmospheric and economic realities rather than policy flaws, underscoring the need for cooperative design. Climate mitigation as public health strategy. The modeling frames climate action as a large-scale health intervention. Reductions in fossil fuel use and associated emissions translate directly into lower PM 2.5 exposure and fewer premature deaths. Yet national averages can obscure dependence on external emissions cuts. Policymakers face a dual challenge: lowering total emissions while accounting for how mitigation choices redirect pollution flows across borders. From a business perspective, this reframes climate policy as both systemic risk and potential value creation. Coordinated action can deliver lower long-term healthcare burdens in key growth markets, greater social and political stability in regions critical to global supply chains, more predictable regulatory environments through policy alignment. Conversely, fragmented approaches may reduce global emissions while intensifying relative burdens in countries least equipped to respond. That imbalance can translate into volatility, development setbacks, and heightened geopolitical tension, all of which feed back into global markets. The central takeaway is straightforward. Unilateral climate action may be insufficient in a world where pollution travels freely. Cross-border collaboration is becoming a business imperative, not solely an environmental objective. Clean air functions as a shared global asset. The research suggests that protecting it requires coordinated policy frameworks that reflect the realities of atmospheric transport and economic interdependence. If designed with equity and cooperation in mind, climate action can reduce mortality, stabilize markets, and strengthen long-term economic resilience.